Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how I turned these lumps of resin into the Hulk. What a lot of people don't think about when you are gluing models together, you're gluing them both together on really smooth surface. You're not giving the glue very much to bite into. So on the surfaces where you're going to be gluing together, if you sand them both down just a little bit, just rough them up, you're going to give the super glue a little bit more to bite into. And you'll find you have a better, longer and stronger contact. There's a nice little trick as well for fixing seams. If you mix a bit of baby powder in with the leftover resin when you clean out your tank, and make it into kind of like a putty. Now, I made a video on how to do this, but nobody watched it. Really easy to do. Just mix baby powder in with your resin until you get your desired consistency. And then what you can do is you can ease this into cracks of your model. Once you've done, just take a UV torch and just cure it as you would normally when you're using resin to fill in your crack. Now, benefit of this is that the resin putty mix, whatever you want to call it, is a lot more pliable and a lot easier to work with than just runny resin. This is one of the problems I've run into. Print's kind of misaligned a little bit, so I filled it in with my UV putty. But still going to be a lot of sanding to do around here. I don't think I've done too bad a job at fixing the lines in his wrists. However, I have a feeling that my first coat of primer will disagree. So if I can give you any advice to take away from this video, if you're scaling your models up or down when printing them, make sure you know what you are scaling them up or down to. Make a note of it, because I certainly don't have the resources to be able to keep on printing random sized models and hope that they fit. I've had a right nightmare with this. I've had to totally chew up the key on the bottom of his leg. Finally fitting. Just, I don't know if something's gone wrong with the print, but yeah, totally warped. But anyway, finally finished the prep stage. Now it's on to the paint. So in terms of primer, what I normally use is Citadel Chaos Black. This stuff is fantastic. You can just see every little detail in the model. But what I think I'm going to use for the Hulk is go back to my Vallejo surface primer. This just goes straight in the airbrush. It is good stuff, it's messy, and I haven't used it since I had my old airbrush, which was basically a handheld compressor, and it didn't go on too well. So now I've got a more powerful compressor, it should go through with a little bit higher PSI. Primer is now done, and as I expected, this stuff should be called Mother because it picks faults in everything you do. Managed to fix the problems with his wrist, but there's still so much there that I'm afraid I'm going to start losing detail if I sand any more. So I've just had to leave that. It's not too bad now. There's still some issues underneath his arm, which again I've just had to leave. So first thing I'm going to do is zenithal shadow with royal purple. I'm going to get into all of the shadows underneath the Hulk's arms. I don't know why I'm going to do this. I just think that purple is going to be a really good contrast to the dark green that I'm going to be spraying over to block it out. Chances are I might have to end up respraying the whole thing. I don't know, but I want to see how this works out. Okay, so that turned into a little less zenithal and a little more pre-shading, but I'm quite happy with how that turned out actually. I do think that once I start putting some green over, it's going to give it a real nice contrast. So I'm going to start off with some watered down darker green and then move up through the midtones and then the highlights. I'm going to start off with a really dark blue for the underneath and the shadows of the pants. Maybe either lighten it up with a little bit of white, or I'll just choose a different blue altogether to do the highlights. So next up, I'm going to use some heavily watered down angel green to go over the entire of Hulk's body and see how the purple contrast looks. So now I've given the Hulk a clear coat, and I'm going to start with his main skin tone, and for that I'm going to be using green skin from Army Painted War Paints. It's the old style now. It's Army Painter War Paints Fanatic 2.0, I think that's out now, but I've still got loads that I need to use up. So now we're on to the last stage with the airbrush, thankfully, because I've had to clean it out about 6 times. So I'm onto the highlighting stage, and for this I'm going to be using Wild Green from Army Painter. I'm only going to hit it where I think the light's going to be shining. So here is the Hulk now, hopefully all finished off and sealed. When it comes to sealing, I've got 2 go-to sealers. This stuff is just amazing. It works for everything. It's matte. Well, you can get it in satin and gloss as well if you want it to, but I use this for matte in between layers as a final layer, and it's absolutely fantastic. But when I want something that is kind of satin, I use this stuff from Hobbycraft. It says it's matte, but it's clearly not. I mean, you can see Hulk's already started to get his leathery look, and that's the kind of look that I want for him. I'm going to start with the base. I'm going to start with Gunmetal Grey. So the next step now, I'm going to experiment with some Grimoire Purple on his feet. I think I'm going to put a bit more purple into these as well, because the Hulk kind of does have purple pants in the comic books, although he does wear jeans in the movies and stuff. I mean, the Hulk shouldn't technically have pants anyway, should he? I mean, Bruce Banner's maybe a size 34 waist at the very most, and this guy, he's like quadruple his size, so it'd be like a, I don't know, 120-inch waist, and those jeans aren't stretching that much. I don't care where he got them from. Bizarrely, right at this moment in time, my daughter is giving my wife a facial, and I'm giving the Hulk a manicure. Right, what I'm about to do may result in a total respray of these trousers, but I want to give them more of a purple tint, so I'm going to use some Grimoire Purple, and I'm just going to dry brush them. So it turns out a facial for the wife was not the only thing on the cards this evening. Thank you, Eva. So I've done the Royal Purple on the pants now. It looks good, but I think it's a little bit too vivid. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over with the Grimoire Purple now, and hopefully that should change the sort of overall hue of the trousers, bring it down a little bit. If not, we're probably going to have to go back over with a black wash. Right, next step, I'm going to get some green into these rips in his pants. So for this, I'm going to use green skin. So I've finished off putting all of the green into the tears on his trousers. Now, I don't feel that it needs a second coat of green. I haven't been too careful. There's a few parts where I've hit some green onto the purple. I'm not too concerned about that, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and pick out some of the rips in this fabric with a dark grey. So for the detailing on the rips around his pants, I'm going to use Grey Castle. Okay, so I have finished the detail, I think, around the rips on his trousers. I've put in a couple of veins. I think it looks quite good. We'll see how it looks when we get the Hulk on. Next thing to do is going to be, I'm going to paint in his belt, and then we'll do some shading, probably with a Drakenhof Nightshade just around where the shadows are. Bring that blue up a little bit more. For the belt, I'm going to use Leather Brown. Right, so I've got my trousers all varnished and hopefully protected. So now what I'm going to put on a coat of oil wash. Now, I made this myself with some oil paint and some turpentine substitute or white spirit. Did it about a 50-50 ratio, give it a good shake up. Now this stuff is really smelly, it's messy, it gets everywhere, and it's not easy to work with. So make sure you mix it properly and have plenty of cleaning stuff to hand when you're using it. So I'm going to let it dry a little bit, but not too much before I take it off. To take it off, I'm just going to use the blue roll that I've got lying around. Okay, so I think that looks much better now. It's toned the colours down a lot. It's filled in all the cracks where I wanted it to. It's especially toned the white down around the edges, and I'm really, really happy with that now. And the good thing about the oil wash, I'm going to blast this with a hairdryer now just to speed up the drying process. But once it's dry, I can still wipe it off if I find places where it's not quite good enough, because I put that clear coat on. And another good pointer for the oil wash, and this is particularly for you, Mr. Ground Affected, I'm not sure if you knew, but the oil wash is basically the same as this stuff, only far less expensive. So once this runs out, I'm probably going to just top this bottle up. Just use my oil wash to get into the, as he likes to put it, the cracks and crevices. After a coat of my Humbrol varnish, it's brought it back to the texture that I like, kind of more matte. So now I think I'm done with the pants and the feet. I'm going to glue them together, then it's starting to work on the Hulk's torso. First thing I'm going to do with the torso is see if I can bring back a little bit of that purple, because I think I've gone a little bit too overboard with some of the airbrushing and highlighting that I did. So I'm going to give it a purple wash. For this I'm just going to be using my purple paint and a bit of water. So it didn't actually work out too much as planned. It did bite into the model quite well. Obviously I didn't seal it all as well as I thought I had. And I got some paint runs quite badly down here which dried without me realising. But that's okay, I mean the shadows look really good. And dry brushing is one of my favourite parts of painting anyway. So I'm just going to let this dry and give it another coat with the highlights with some wild green. So yet again, I find myself asking the question, why do I bother trying to do airbrush detail shading when I much prefer the results that I get by hand? I think, given the mistakes that I made doing the purple wash, this looks far better than it did originally now. I'm really happy with that, all because of the dry brush. So I think I'm probably going to retire the airbrush, except for when I need to cover larger areas. Next step now is put some veins into his torso, the same colour that I did on his feet, which is going to be grimoire purple. Those blue veins stand out way too much and I don't like it. I'm going to paint them all a dark blue and then I'm going to give them a very light dry brushing over with the green. Hopefully it's not going to ruin things too much. If not, I'm just going to repaint everything purple. Now I'm going to use my little dry brush with some wild green on the higher parts just to see if I can cover up these blues a little bit. For the lower parts I'm going to go back to green skin. So I think I've toned down the veins a little bit. It looks a lot better now. It looks a lot more subtle and a lot more natural. I'm not going to go too mental with it. Hopefully it's not going to be the main focus point of it anyway. So now all I'm doing is I'm going to use a little bit of dead flesh mixed in with whatever is already on my brush, just to pick out a few more highlights. I have picked out the Hulk's highlights and he looks a little bit more comic booky now. I think the veins have been toned down quite nicely as well. I'm really pleased with how it's come out so far. So I think what I'm going to be doing now is starting to work on his hair and his face. The eyes I'm pretty terrified about because they're tiny. I think I need to put a little bit more yellow on his fingernails, so we're very close to being done. I'm going to go with his fingernails. I'm going to use some beige and I'm going to tone it down with some strong tone. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to block out his hair. I'm going to do that with the first black colour that I picked up, which is this one. I think I give up with Citadel paints. You know, the shades are amazing. I couldn't live without Nuln Oil and an Agrax Earth shade. I just cannot get to grips with their actual paint. They've never covered for me as well as any other brand. Even the cheaper acrylics cover better than these. So if I'm doing something wrong with them, I just use them like my normal paint. I water them down ever so slightly. If I'm doing something wrong with them, please let me know in the comments. I give up with that. I'm going to go over to Matte Black by Army Painter. Right, so the next challenge I've got, I'm going to be picking out some of the stubble around his head. I think what I'm probably going to do is use a normal paintbrush but dry it out a lot, get most of the paint off. So I started off there using black paint, but then finished off using strong tone, and I think it's worked out really well for the stubble around the side of his head. It's not too dark, not too light. Next, I'm going to move on to his mouth and his eyes, and the first thing I'm going to do is give them a coat of white or deck tan. So as I expected, I ended up painting some white and then painting some green and then painting some white and then painting some green, and there was no point in recording it because you would have just seen me staring at the Hulk with a tiny paintbrush in my hand, panicking. It's not very good looking up close, but it doesn't look too bad. Just need to paint the pupils in and I'll start working on the mouth. But what I'm also going to start doing is making some harder lines around his face with a bit of dark green. I don't think that's too bad. Really at this scale, it's probably as best it's going to get. Right, next thing I'm going to do is give the inside of his mouth coat the pink that I normally use for gums and lips and stuff like that, which is this brown rose colour. It's going to look alright with a bit of a transparent red wash over there, which is what I'm going to do next. Now what I'm going to do is mix in salmon colour and the red colour to just give a very, very light coat on his lips. And next he gets a coat of beige on his teeth because I don't suppose he has the best dental hygiene. Next I'm going to give him a gory red wash around his mouth. I think his mouth looks pretty awesome as it is, to be honest, so I'm just going to use a bit of dark green to tone down where the dry brush has hit too much. Hopefully it's not going to look totally ridiculous. Almost the very last step, I'm going to use a bit of Grey Castle just to put some highlights into his hair. Right, next thing I like to do is just add some harder lines around where his muscles and some of the shadows are, just in a dark green, just so it kind of gives it a little bit of a cell shady look, and then just paint in some of the shadows. Right, very last stages. I've used my craft sealer on the Hulk's torso and his feet. I've already used my Humbrol sealer on his pants. The last thing I'm doing now is using some satin varnish on the little gaps in between his pants where I didn't want to spray. You get some gloss varnish on his mouth. And this model is officially done.